Daniel, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
So I have heard about you before from Mark, your brother, who's a friend of the show, been on the podcast several times. And when I think I somehow got connected to your Substack through this ubiquitous thing, Substack now, which everybody's moving to, right? It's like
Yeah,
it's become the fad. Everybody's on Substack, and
I know.
here's my stack, and you use double stack, my triple stack, and stack that up, baby. She's
Yep.
stacked.
I
So
saw there was a somebody posted, maybe it was one of the Substack founders, that the search on Google for Substack has exceeded the search for newsletter in like for the first time. So people are instead of just it's become the sort of identified so closely with the idea of a newsletter that it is replacing the word. It's like the Kleenex of digital dissemination platforms or something like that.
this has got to feel great if you are the guy
Yeah.
that's the Substack guy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's utterly fantastic. So I discovered your podcast, and I'm not, you're not paying me or anything. This is just effusive,
Not as far
gratuitous
as I know.
praise.
Yeah.
Exactly. You might at the end. No, I love it. I love it's aspirationally a lot of what I hope this podcast is about, but better. It's just so fantastic. And it's exactly the kind of conversations I try to facilitate wherever I can, and it's just long form. You're able to like let some things play out, which I think is interesting. Is that so? Just tell me before we get into some of the content. Let's go form. You always got to make the form versus content
Yeah.
decision. So let's talk about the form a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
how did you? What made you start the podcast? I mean, is it how long have you been into podcasting? What's the story of the origin of your podcast,
Yeah.
Eminent
What
Americans? Is it
what
because
is
you're such an eminent American?
so?
You're just
Yeah.
you're emanating right now, by the way. For the folks that
Eminence.
are
Yeah.
listening,
Yeah.
you're just the eminence level on the
Is this
show.
video,
Just
by the way, or is this
it
just
is
audio?
video. We're on
Oh, okay.
so we're on Facebook Live and
Oh, okay.
YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, for those of you who are listening after the fact and can't see me, I'm sort of emanating a little bit of a glow. That's right, Scott? Right?
Yeah, I mean, you're glowing. I mean, you're glowing.
Well, I'm glowing because you're saying such nice things about me. Yeah. So, let me think about the answer to that. So, I had been thinking about doing a podcast for years before I sort of finally launched into it, and it's just for the obvious reasons, which is one, I'm just like a middle-aged guy, so I'm sort of contractually obligated to be into podcasts and to imagine that I would be an amazing podcaster myself. But I liked podcast. I think originally I got into it. I think maybe Mark Maron's podcast was my first real sort of podcast love, and then and so that just became the thing that I would listen to in the car when I was driving to and from work or wherever, and then when I was, exercising or at the gym or something like that, I would just listen to podcasts. Usually political podcasts, a lot of like interview podcasts, cultural stuff. So I thought about it for years, and I hesitated for two reasons. One was it seemed like it would be a lot of work. And so the tools got to the point, particularly with like these kind of AI, like Descript and other kind of software like that, where you can just kind of edit in the text and then it does the edits in the audio. And I didn't become a wizard of an editor, but the tools got so good that I was able to do it without investing so much time beyond uh, recording the original conversation. And the other thing, I was just looking for the concept that made sense for me. I just had this intuition, which I think is the right one, which is that if you don't have the right concept, if you're not looking forward to having the conversation with people, and if it's not a conversation that highlights your own kind of whatever your strengths are as a talker, then it'll die. It'll die on the vine. Nobody's paying me to do it. I'll get bored. People will be bored listening to it. And so I had all these different concepts. I don't remember what they were, but they never quite seemed right to me. And then I think at about the same time, like the tools started to get good enough where I felt like technologically I could handle editing it and publishing it myself. And then Substack was part of that as well. And then I just hit on this idea, which was just like I'm obsessed with talking about the intellectual scene and the thought leaders, pundits, political actors. And I want to be having in-depth, nuanced, long conversations about these kinds of things that I know it's not only me that cares about, but in my immediate sort of social world, it's really only me that cares about it. I can talk to my brother about it on the phone sometimes, but I'm in Austin, which is like a good sized city. I just wasn't surrounded by people who wanted to do, multiple conversations about, so and so who's up and coming on Substack, or wanted to talk about Noam Chomsky or Ta-Nehisi Coates or
If someone ever says that about me,
what.
I think I want to shoot them than myself. Ah, hey Scott, he's up and coming on Substack.
Well, like I just like
The kid's an up and comer.
I know.
I like the cut of his jib.
That is that is one of my that is one of the ambivalences I deal with right now, which is like I actually think being up and coming on Substack is a really interesting thing culturally, but it's so embarrassing to talk. It's so embarrassing to talk about. Anyway, I knew that I was interested in these things. I
So
did know that.
I by the way, I'm unpartnered, right? And I'm
Yeah.
not there. Yeah, I might not want to be unpartnered forever. So that's one thing. I'm just gonna put that on a dating profile. I'm a real up and comer on Substack.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, then you'll be remain unpartnered for the rest of your life.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, and also I put the D in douchebag.
Right. I know it's also embarrassing. But I knew that I knew the things I was interested in. There were other people who were interested in them, and I actually knew the one thing that gave me a little bit of a sort of hope, not that I would blow up and it would be immensely viral, but just that there would be some people who are interested in, is like the stuff that I'm interested in is things that like people in the media industry and in the journalistic industry are kind of interested in, and it felt like it was a need or an interest that wasn't being fully addressed in the way that I thought I wanted to kind of approach it. So that, I mean, that's the answer, which is, and I when I started it, it was actually more of a written newsletter than a podcast. It's kind of morphed much more into a podcast than a written piece, and some of that is just time constraints. But some of it is like doing podcasts is fun and writing is hard.
It's funny, and again, I apologize to listeners who don't find Substack fascinating, but I think it's Jim Acosta, the DC reporter. Yeah, so he is doing a Substack, and
Yeah, was he fired from? Wasn't he on one of the networks and then he left or was fired or something? Right.
he was on one of the terrible. I mean, they're all fake. Disgrace. It was a disgraceful network. Okay, it was
CNN.
so pathetic. CNN fake news. I love when Trump does the press conferences, and he'll just say, "I mean, you're CNN fake news," but okay, I'll take the question. Like, it's so demeaning. It's fantastic. So I guess he might get fired or something, and he was on with the president of Substack because apparently his podcast on Substack has blown up, and they're talking about it. He's like, it's just so easy. You pop the thing open, you want to have a conversation, and you just in your Substack, and I have the mic and the thing, and it's like I remember when Brit Hume was explaining Twitter to Bill O'Reilly, and Bill O'Reilly's like, I mean, come on, Hume, come on. I mean, yeah, you're a grown man. I mean, come on, Hume, with the thing. And he's like, oh no, Bill. I mean, you just get your phone out and you play with it for a half hour. You'd have a ball. And it was just, it's just so now we're these guys talking like this that people will mock. They should be mocking us.
Somebody mocked me yesterday. What did they call me? Like a something ignoramus or something like that. Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, they should be mocking us, and I accept the mockery. On the other hand, I like apologies for the earnestness. Like
I accept. That's like when FDR said, "I'm so hated. I welcome their hatred." You welcome their mockery.
I welcome their mockery, but I'm sorry, like it's where the action is. Like this is where, like if you're in sort of journalism, criticism, political commentary, I'm sure. I mean, there's lots of other spheres that are happening in Substack that I'm not a part of the food world or the MMA world or any of these other worlds. But in those subcultures, which are important, influential, like elite subcultures or cultures, like this is where the action is, and it's clear. Like you can read. I mean, I feel like literally 2/3 of the New York Times columnists, like every other one of their column will reference something they read on Substack. They're all reading it. They're all reading. Not me necessarily. A few of them are reading me, but like it's where the leading edge energy is, and it's like funny that it's in an embarrassing space. But blogging was when blogging got big, it was an embarrassing space. It's still an embarrassing space, right? I mean, it was like guys in pajamas in their basement, right? And now it's just like middle-aged dads in their office or something like that, like we are. But yeah, it is embarrassing. But I'm sorry, like that's where the action is. That's just true. So people
It,
can
it,
mock
it
me,
is
but
totally true. It is completely where the action is, and the action is right here.
it's, I mean,
That's
right,
where it is.
literally at this moment is where the action is. Yeah,
Being we're like something out of Heidegger, being in time. It's the time, and we're being here. We are.
yeah.
So I have found there's so much I want to talk about, particularly the first episode that I listened to, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I was just listening today, Daniel. I've
Hmm.
been just taking this steady diet of Daniel Oppenheimer and these eminent
Yeah.
Americans, just digesting. And I listened to today the J. Crew and the Romance of the Roll Neck Sweater
Yeah.
episode with Maggie Bullock, and it brought me back to when I was a freshman in college, stepping onto a liberal arts campus in central Pennsylvania. And I was from South Jersey. My parents didn't go to college.
Oh, yeah.
I just was, I mean, I just didn't grow up with sort of a lot of cultured elite anything. And I saw these pricks in these stone colored chinos
Yeah.
and the roll neck sweater from J. Crew, and I thought I want to be a prick like that. I mean,
Oh,
the
totally.
girls they were with, I wanted to be that prick, and I wasn't. And
Yeah.
it
I'm
it it
glad you own
just
that though, right? It is a powerful voodoo, right?
oh, they were different. They were different. They looked like they were from New England, which was cool.
Yeah.
They looked like they summered. Their Christmas, everything looked like it was better than I just imagined the dinner conversations with their and and they were they were the black sheep of the family that were at this school. I mean, their friends were really their sister was at Wellesley or something,
Right.
and so I just looked and I said, oh, even to be on the bottom rung of that family and have that J. Crew sweater and be one of them.
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis has this great phrase. I think it's an essay called "The Inner Ring." It's like this is just humanity. You want to be in the. Everyone
Yeah.
thinks they're in the. And you, J. Crew for me.
Yeah.
It's this kid from South Jersey was the inner ring, and it was so interesting. You two did such a great job of putting of describe of expositing what was behind that, and it was
Yeah.
so. It made so much sense of my experience.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was going to say I don't actually think I never had any fantasy about their dinner time conversation. I think the dinner time conversation in these high wasp spaces is not that interesting. But there,
Look,
I mean,
my parents were low wasps. Okay, they were.
oh, okay.
I'm adopted, but so
Well,
I
whatever.
don't.
I mean,
But they for a low wasp to be in that part of the
okay.
hive. I
Right.
mean,
I was
come
gonna say
on.
as a Jew, as like a secular, northeastern Jew, like we had the edge. We always had the edge on the dinner table conversation. I didn't have any anxiety about that, but the I don't. I mean, it did feel like the air. So I had a similar experience. I mean, I don't want to overstate my relative lack of privilege. Like when I came to prep school in ninth grade at this place in Connecticut, I was not coming from a working class background. I was coming from a very educated background. It just happened to be the case that we grew up in a sort of working class city. So I wasn't around J. Crew clothing. I wasn't around people who summered in Nantucket and wintered in Vail and those sorts of things. So I was fine. We were great. We had privilege, relative speaking, relative upper middle class, but I still had no experience with that sort of world or that aesthetic. So I think my experience of stepping onto that campus was probably comparable to yours stepping onto your college campus, which is like, what the hell is what are these clothes? Like, I don't know how to wear them. I don't know where to buy them. And but I want that. Like, and I spent years. I mean, I mean, in some ways, I don't think I'm still trying. I think I figured it out. I don't look precisely like that, but I've kind of achieved the rough version of that is acceptable to me as an adult. But it took me like 50. I just think that's the fantasy. That's the aesthetic fantasy that I have been seeking for all of these years.
What's so
And
funny for me? I would never dress like that now. It's just
no, you
not
just
at all.
rejected it.
Well, it's something about me. I mean, for our listeners, I'm wearing a kind of vibrant shirt. It's sort of like, I mean, it's not flash or anything, but that's not my style. But then I wanted to. I bought
Yeah.
Birkenstocks. I remember
Yeah, me too.
I was
I didn't
like,
like them. I couldn't wear them. I just didn't like. They didn't feel comfortable to me, but I did buy them. Yeah.
my best friend from college was from Long Island, and I went to a religious college. I wasn't raised very religious, but I had a conversion to Christianity as a teenager, not preteen, I think, actually. And I was always envious of these people that had this vibrant religious culture and went to camp. So I'll go to this place called Messiah College, named after Mashiach.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
Yeah.
so. It's three girls to every guy. The food was great. I thought this will be, it'll be like camp. But my roommate my best friend was from Long Island, and he was. I mean, even though this was a Christian college, I just fell in with all the pagans because they were just normal people. They were
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
people I could relate to from high school. I didn't really relate to the Baptist kids or the megachurch kids. But I walked in. I was dating this artist, and I walked in with like a wool sweater, Birkenstocks. He says, "What the hell? You have Jesus sandals on, man?" He was like so aghast that I had donned these things.
So do you think are what you're wearing now, is it kind of the adult version of what you grew up around? How did you get to your look now?
That's a great question. I asked the question too, Daniel.
Sorry, I'm totally
No,
I mean, as you know, I'm totally
no,
fascinated by
no,
these
no.
things. And I think men don't often, or at least straight men don't often, I don't know if you're straight, but like you have kind of straight vibes. But like
Yeah,
straight
yeah,
men don't
yeah.
talk about these things, right? Gay men talk about these things, women talk about these things. It's very like I'm just fascinated by it because obviously we're making these choices. I mean, whether we're not everybody's consciously making these choices. Some people are unconsciously. It's just like this is what the people around me are wearing. This is how the people around me do their hair. I'm just going to go ask for that thing or buy that thing. But we're making these choices that signal to the world like who we want to be taken as being, like who we are. And it's fascinating. I mean, it's just a text you
It
can read,
is.
right?
No, it is. It's living text, embodied text, right? And I think
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever heard of the Enneagram. It's to
Yes. Is that like the
personality.
Yeah, is that which one is that? Is that where you like talk about? Is it you have to fill out your family tree or something, or is
No,
that?
no, it's very
Oh, okay.
it's. I mean, everybody loves the Myers Briggs, right? The
Yeah, yeah.
ENFP, all that stuff.
Okay. Yeah,
Introvert, extrovert, perceiving, judging. All that stuff.
yeah,
The Enneagram is based on Jungian archetypes, and really, it's all about your shadow side and darkness. But so the Enneagram, Myers Briggs, like you're this great. Da, 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 da. I mean, the Enneagram is more like you have these deep childhood wounds and this and these longings, but there's hope. You could integrate a little bit and not be a miserable asshole. Like it's great, but my type is the type 4. It's the individualist and sometimes the romantic side. But so I think I like things that I dispositionally, my personality does not want to be the cookie cutter
mm,
fisherman sweater walk on doing everything about me. When I think about that now, strikes me as something. It's a perfectly fine aesthetic. I mean, I don't hate
yeah,
the aesthetic, but it's just not me. But I would have killed for it to be me
yeah,
in college. I thought because those people seemed again, it's the inner ring thing, right? It's the they were in the inner ring and I was not.
yeah, yep.
And so that for now my aesthetic suits me. I mean, I think I and people I think yeah, I got a compliment today from someone saying, "I really like the way you dress." Actually, two or three people actually said something. Look at me! I mean, this is fantastic.
Well,
I'm
it's
winning.
interesting.
I'm winning. I'm winning.
Yeah, and I'm not, I'm really not embarrassed about having just kind of capitulated to that sort of aesthetic. I do think we make choices about even those of us who want to be, unique individuals and kind of apart from the herd and how I do think we make choices in which realms we're going to assert that sort of idiosyncrasy. And I think I accepted at some point that like I was not going to assert my sort of, unique snowflake identity, one of a kind in the sartorial realm. Like I was going to be as free as possible as a writer, maybe as a talker, and as a dresser, I was just going to be like boring, tasteful, try and find clothes that like fit my body in a way that feels flattering, and I'm just going to go with that. And also now I have all these people enforcing it on me, like my wife and my kids. If I tried to do anything interesting, I mean, I would just get smacked down so quickly. Um, so it's not worth
They
it.
would. They would. They would. No, they would not. They would say no. That you have dad. There's a certain dad aesthetic
You
that
know, I think
you've
my
got to.
wife
You've got to.
I think I think my wife would like me to look richer. I think she likes like more put together. And she wouldn't be against that. It's not looking good. It's not she's against me looking good. And in fact, if I look too kind of schlubby, sometimes she doesn't love that. So she would want me to look good. I think it's more that like sometimes I'm like, oh, like sometimes I'm drawn to just more color, more prints, more something that's more dramatic. Like I like fashion. I like drama in the aesthetic realm, and I like the idea of being able to do that myself. I'll see people who are like have super interesting style, and I admire that. And I think that kind of, but that's weird, right? That makes you stand out. Like that kind of like the really stylish people are putting all sorts of odd things together or looking odd. And I just that's where my family there's no desire for their dad slash husband to be. It would also take me a long time to figure out how to do it well, right? So there would be this terrible transition phase when I was wearing these like ridiculous things that just looked ridiculous on me. So anyway, now none of it is worth it. This is not a great crisis in my life. I'm happy with my you know t-shirts and jeans and crew neck sweaters and whatever simple leather shoes.
There we go. Well, you look fantastic.
Thank
Just
you.
for the
I'm wearing
record.
my Springfield. I don't know if you saw this. I'm from Springfield, Massachusetts. I'm wearing my Springfield T-shirt right now. My bright blue Springfield T-shirt.
So, interestingly, the first podcast I listened to was the episode. It was a pretty recent episode. It was with Bill Derisiewicz,
Mm-hmm.
"The Rise of the Not Left,"
Yeah.
and I I called like three people as I was listening to it. I didn't even finish, and I was on the phone about it. I do a couple podcasts. Another one I do with a progressive pastor who's up in Vermont, and I was like, this is so fantastic and right, and something that Derisiewicz said that I think you agreed with, you did agree with, and you both teased it out, was that the left, the current left, by that we're talking about, I guess, one that is driven by what we think of as progressives, or for lack of better sakes, some of the woke energy, or for better
Yeah.
term, woke, is against the life force.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you guys said life force, I immediately went to Nietzsche and will to power, which I think most people misunderstand. Like I say, if you want to understand will to power, this is not fascism. It's, why does a dog want to run fast and chase
Right.
a squirrel? It's just because it can. Like the creature wants to maximize it wants to practice extension of itself.
Yeah.
And you guys were saying, whether it's in sex or express or all this stuff, that you guys were saying that the left right now in its current instantiation is not the playful, provocative. It hates the life. It wants to domesticate it.
Yeah.
It doesn't trust it. It wants to muzzle it. I mean, everything you said brought me to the negative stereotypes of Puritans, which, I mean, the
Yeah.
Puritans weren't as puritanical as we think. But when we think of the Puritans and the worst evocative images, when we think of it, that's what you guys were describing as
Yeah.
the current left.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and specifically that thing. I mean, and John McWhorter wrote a book, I think, where he essentially was saying, he said that like wokeness is just kind of modern day Puritanism, or it's just it's all the people who just would have been somewhat censorious, mainline Protestants, 100 years ago or something, and now, everybody's fallen away from the church, but they've just reconstituted in a certain sense and sort of, in political or ideological form. Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think like, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I was just writing. There's something I just published today where I said this, but I've been saying it to myself and whoever will listen for a while, which is just like, I thought I had structured my life and made my life choices such that I would be amongst the people who were just kind of like the sort of fun, rebellious, atheistic, secular spirit that I identified with, literature, philosophy, bohemia, the left. Um, I thought I had made all the right choices to end up in that world and be surrounded by those people. And then I woke up one day 7 or 8 years ago and was like, oh shit, I'm in church. Can I swear, by the way? I don't know what the rules are.
You can do anything. This is
Okay.
not. We are completely pro life force.
Flow
Okay,
life force. Okay.
you are. With
Yeah.
this is there is so much life force
Okay.
in this
No,
podcast. Our
all right.
vital sign. I mean, we put the vital in vital
Right.
signs.
We are restoring precious bodily fluids to the body politic. I
Absolutely.
think so. We're injecting, injecting precious bodily fluids,
Yeah, this
just
is
pumping them in.
IVs. We are cultural IVs.
Yeah. And it was like, and it was and it's funny. I mean, like I felt like I woke up and I was in church or something like that, right? I was surrounded. I'm in like a deep blue part of a deep blue city of a red state, but I mean, I'm in Austin, Texas, which is a very democratic city. It's a very liberal city, and I felt like I woke up and I was in church, and I want to try and be a little bit more nuanced than I sometimes am in saying what that means. That doesn't mean I was surrounded by zealots. Like if you think about, it doesn't. It's not like if you think about what like a nice congregationalist church was probably in the 1950s or something like that, like it's not mostly zealots, like it's a few annoying, overzealous, moralistic scolds who are in some respects setting the tone for the rest of most of the congregation are sort of nice, relatively conformist people who just want to get along and they want to know what the rules are and they'll follow the rules, right? So that's
So you're literally in a congregation right now, or you're just talking about a metaphor?
I'm doing a metaphor.
I was like, yeah, wait.
No, I'm
You're
not.
in a
No.
congregation.
I'm not. We were going to a Unitarian church for a little while, and so and then
Sorry to hear that.
yeah. Anyway,
Anybody that prays to whom it may concern is not, you're not going to get. There's no pizzazz in that.
they were lovely people. Unitarians have always been fairly political, at least the ones I've known, but it got like excessively political even for Unitarians, and I didn't want to do it anymore. Also, I'm just uncomfortable in church in general, even in a to whom it may concern church. But
No, is that your Judaism growing up?
we were very Jewish, but very non-religious. I mean, that was so we felt uncomfortable and almost as uncomfortable in synagogues I speak for myself, in temple or synagogue as we did in church. Um, but still, I mean, still very strong sense of sort of identification with Jewish culture. So going to a church, even one that says kind of like, is it Christian? Is it not? As Unitarians was always a little bit felt a little off for me, but there were other reasons why it made sense to do it. And then at some point, particularly after COVID started, and it was like watching it on, on YouTube or something like that. It was just forget it.
COVID did to a lot of congregations. I think synagogues, churches, various kinds of religious communities. It did advanced aging.
Yeah.
Communities that maybe had 15 years left in them, all of a sudden did advanced age because people stopped coming, people stopped giving, and then you get out of the habit of it. And then when they're like, all right, we're back. I'm like, yeah, I don't miss it.
Right.
It just, it was huge. I mean, huge. It just had such an impact.
That's interesting.
On religious life.
Just like severing the habit, it's much harder to sort of reconstitute the habit, to make this sort of affirmative choice to go back to it after the sort of the habit has been broken and the sky didn't fall. Yeah, I don't know. So that was just everything you said, talking about our episode about the life force. Like it felt like a world that I lived in that felt kind of secular and sort of nicely pagan around the edges or something like that. Suddenly I woke up and it felt sort of puritanical. Again, not most people zealously wanting to convert others or to send them to hell, condemn them to hell, but a small number of people who really were zealous in that way, setting the tone for the rest of the people, and then everybody else kind of, all the conformist people kind of getting in line, and me feeling like just alienated from it, and still holding all of the kind of basic political commitments I did.
And you'd be on the left end. I mean, you and
Bill
Teresiewicz both said like we're left of. We've always been on the sort of democratic socialist, Bernie Sanders, social democracy. We'd like to be where Scandinavia. So you guys, you're not. It's not as though you're old school Bobby Kennedy Democrats and saying, "Hey, welfare is demeaning to people."
Right.
You're not that kind of Democrat. I mean, you guys are. So your frustration with the left is cultural. It seems
it's cultural. Yeah, it's just yes. It's yeah, and I remain that. I mean, I remain that. I mean, I sort of there was no. I was happy. Was I happy to vote for Kamala Harris? I was happy to vote for Kamala Harris. She was not a particularly dynamic candidate, but I didn't have a lot of reservations about it. I think the Democratic Party, even in the extreme moments of the woke ascendancy or something in 2020 and 2021, I still felt like the the center of the Democratic Party was pretty temperate, and there was a lot of kind of surface symbolic stuff they were doing that, like, politically was idiotic. But I didn't ever really feel like the soul of the Democratic Party was some kind of like zealous, moralizing, you know, sort of soft, tyrannical entity. So I didn't have a lot of reservation about voting for Democrats, but culturally, I mean, I just think it did a lot of damage. It was not, it was an anti-life force. It was an anti-aesthetic. It was a anti-fun sort of period, for which I blame the left. I mean, the right I blame for all sorts of things, but it was not, and I think in some ways still isn't, and probably, if I don't want to say never will be, but if it will, if it is, it won't be influential. The right is not going to be influential in the cultural space, at least in a lot of the spaces where I operate, for a long time, if it ever will be. It's still the left that exerts the cultural influence over, the kinds of TV we make, the kind of movies we make, the kind of novels people write, the main, journalistic organizations and things like that. So, I
Yeah,
think
this
there's,
is something I try to explain to my friends on the left about why, because because I've spent my life in and out of, well, in mostly religious circles, and I know a lot of evangelicals.
yeah,
And they're like, how can this is the most ignorant kind of question. It just, well, not ignorant. It shows lack of understanding and self awareness of elite power on the left. Right?
oh,
I say the evangelicals, they feel bullied. I said,
yeah,
and that's why how could these people that he's so unchristian? I said, because,
yeah,
and, and I was the first person I know, sounds so vain to say this, but on a podcast somewhere, I said, you know how evangelicals view him? He's Cyrus. He's the pagan emperor.
hmm,
And then a couple years later, people say, and then Christians started saying it. Like, it's funny because
yeah,
after that, I heard a couple other intellectuals on the left say it, and now Christians proudly say he's Cyrus. But it's like
right,
when you feel beat up when you feel marginalized, when you're part of the flyover states, you're an evangelical. You're never characterized as something positive or
yeah,
flattering, or people don't even know you, right? And then this guy comes and he can punch back,
yeah,
right? And he can really, and he shows up at the national right to life rally, and he seems to give a kind of deference that that Bush and Reagan and these people, none of these old school Republicans, they didn't want to be around
yeah,
evangelicals, right? But I think Trump kind of thinks it's neat when Paul White prays. Okay, all right, look at they're praying for me. Oh my God, I love the prayers. Let me tell you what, I have the best prayers. Right? I mean, and we love prayer. We love it. We love, I think evangelicals, David French said something to me on this podcast once. He's been on a few times, and he said, I think it's because the evangelicals like fall for this so hook, line, and sinker because they're not used to this much exposure to power
mm,
to be invited. Whereas progressives are used to it. The George
yeah.
Clooney's, the writers, they're used to being around when you're because like you said, they know they control the elite circles. Where who knows when evangelicals will get, or some of these cultures will get the wheel again, right?
Well, so I'm interested in what you think about this, because I think it's one of the things that's so tricky about the spot that we're in right now, and I don't know what to do about it, is they do feel bullied. I think the problem is, and you can point to moments of the last few years when maybe you can point to the sort of, cultural elite and say that they're bullying them or they're expressing contempt for them. But I actually think the fundamental complaint is a kind of insoluble one and not the fault of the left, which is like we just don't live in the country anymore where they are the sort of default, where sort of middle America, white Christian folks are the sort of default protagonist of the narrative. And I don't blame, fr- from my perspective, that's a kind of glorious thing. And I don't know what to do with that. Like, I think that a lot of people feel displaced in the American narrative of like who is the default protagonist, what does the family look like, what does the physical space look like. And I think America has just changed enormously, and I think in a lot of ways for the better, and it's diversified and it's urbanized and it's been inclusive of women in more power and people of different races and gay people and all of these things that from my perspective as a social liberal are good things. And I don't think the cultural elite or the cultural left should punish other people, but there's something that seems totally organic and fine to me about the fact that the archetypal narrative of America has changed. And I think that is a real blow to the identity of these people. And I think that's the primal wound in a lot of ways that's kind of unsolvable, right? Like
Well,
we
you
can't,
know, so this is, but I want to say this.
yeah.
I think you're right. But at another level, the the narrative was never theirs. It just included
Mm,
them in a
mm,
different way, right? I mean, America, for instance, you look at, I mean, something like evangelicalism is a pretty new thing, right? I mean, it's not even Luther, Calvin. It's not the Reformation. They're not evangelicals or something. You know, like what we
right.
think of as individualistic, personal relationship with Jesus, a sort of positivistic view about the Bible is factual and all this
So
stuff.
you're saying I'm grouping them in with just kind of like more
Christians,
Christians, WASPs, more sort of like upper, you're talking very specifically this sort of like evangelicals, low church, like,
yeah, these people, the people that want, yeah, and they shifted, right? I mean, it's interesting because in the early part of the 20th century, where the evangelical movement is born, right, in the 60s, really. I mean, when we think of an evangelical, like the Wheaton College, Billy Graham, Carl Henry, all this
yeah.
stuff, is they're fundamentalist in conviction, but more world affirming and see the culture as worth seeking shalom and building up, cultivating, right? Like trying to redeem the quote unquote redeem the culture that the Calvinists always say. So that, I mean, but I think what happened was that you look at King, okay? Martin Luther King could get up and we had
Yeah.
civil religion. So King could go up and quote some founding fathers, quote a little bit King, some Enlightenment philosophy, Hebrew Bible, not so much the New Testament, unless it was very general ethical maxims. And, the secular Jew could hear their story in King.
Yeah.
So could the evangelical hear their story in King, right? And now I don't know if you needed a massive civil rights movement like that today. Like we don't have that operative civil religion, I don't think anymore. And something fills that space, right? I mean, I don't think this is like
But wasn't that Barack Obama in some sense? That seemed like that was precisely I didn't think that and of course, I mean, he's just one person. He's not necessarily the entirety of the Democratic Party. So, I mean, I want to say on the one hand, obviously Barack Obama won for president twice, and there are people who voted for Trump who voted for Barack Obama, and maybe, but how is Barack Obama's narrative it, exclusive of evangelical
because when you
Christians?
say when people, well, let me think. I mean, here's the thing: when people
Oh,
get
you
anxious,
doing Obama?
I don't normally, but well, I mean, when people get kind of anxious, they grab their Bibles and their guns. That sort of stuff.
I mean, I won't grant
he's
that to
not
you. That was
wrong.
an ill phrased.
Yeah,
I think in general, like I'm not saying he never took a wrong step, but I guess I'd just say in general he seemed to be following that sort of King playbook to the T. Like his great speech about his the sort of Jeremiah Wright speech, or talk about Jeremiah Wright and his grandmother, and sort of, I mean, I like that he was a great bishop in the Church of America's civil religion, it seems to me, and was not able to compel. I mean, he was able to win, but was not able to sort of create a sense of being included in the American story. So I guess all I'm saying, I'm not disagreeing with you all of this. I'm just saying, like, I think it's complicated because I'm happy to blame a lot of things on the left, but I think some of these things are sort of just a structural outcome of this sort of contest for inclusion, or inclusion at a minimum inclusion, but at a maximum sort of centrality in the American narrative. And I don't think that's one of the challenges of a pluralistic society. Like, it's hard to come up with a story that everybody feels included in.
yeah. It's interesting. So I have friends who are evangelicals in England, and they are fascinated that evangelical in America is so political because they say if you're an evangelical in England, it tells me nothing about how you would vote.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
I had a friend who's in a pretty big evangelical Anglican parish. I think he's in London. Yeah, London. He said our parish is equally Tory, Labor, and Liberal Democrat. Like
That's interesting.
There's no,
just has none of the.
No, and there's no evolution creation. They didn't have the same fundamentalist modernist controversy the way we did, and so it's a very different kind of vibe. So I don't know. So
I don't, like, I just, like, I guess I'm sort of, I'm thinking about what would I mean, I think this is a question a lot of people are asking, right? Again, don't want to let the left off the hook for being idiots about certain things and making people feel like just kind of total own goals where we make people feel excluded and like we have contempt for them for no good reason whatsoever. But it is like part of me is like, really? Like, is George Clooney that alienating? Like, George Clooney's so charming. Like, isn't George Clooney charming to everyone? Like, not George Clooney if he decided to like put on a woke hat or something in 2022, but just George Clooney of like what's the Soderbergh heist film? I'm totally blanking on it.
Ocean's 11.
Ocean's 11, aren't they all?
Yeah, who
Doesn't everybody? I
doesn't
mean,
love Ocean's
who doesn't
11?
love Ocean's 11? I'm sorry, like George Clooney's the most charming person
How can
on
you
the
cling to
planet,
thou
right?
shall not steal after you've seen Ocean's? You got to root for the
Right. I mean, I don't know. Like, that was a rainbow coalition of people devoted to this sort of stylish heist or something. I mean, doesn't everybody love George Clooney? I don't know. Is that I was thinking about. Do you watch the show Reacher at all? Do you watch Reacher?
Oh
Or
yeah, I have. I'm more into the movies, but I'm starting to get into this show.
okay, or like, but I was. This is an argument I'm developing. Like, I like Reacher. I like just action shows, and there's a show on CBS called Tracker, which is just
Is
like,
that good?
well, is it good? I mean, it's just adequate enough for me to keep watching each subsequent episode. I mean, it's such a formula, right? It's like
I had a
this.
friend who did a dissertation in English. Said the nicest thing during my doctor work anyone ever said to me. My advisor said, "This is adequate."
This is. I mean, Reacher is adequate too. Like, but it's sort of interesting thinking about there's all these genres of like American television, like the NCIS shows, and like I don't even know what they all are, Fire Country and Tracker and Reacher, which are just like usually it's like a strong, handsome, square-jawed, straight white guy at the center of it who's the hero, and then it's kind of right coded in certain ways, like he kicks a lot of ass, like there's a lot of guns, but it's like it's the civil religion, but there's always a team around him of like every race,
Right,
and usually
right.
usually there's a gay character, and women are kicking ass too. So it's this very
did you
21st.
see? Did you see the Saturday Night Live sketch where they did the Zelensky meeting?
Yeah.
Where I love what Trump said. Thank you for dressing casual Star Trek, and we love Star Trek because there's no DEI. The white guy's in charge, and he gives orders to Spock, who I think is a Guatemalan.
I do remember the casual Star Trek.
Oh yeah, it was so great. No DEI.
But like that's an interesting. Like there are actually these things that probably make everybody feel. Does anybody feel excluded by Reacher or NCIS or
Yeah,
Tracker?
because I don't have enough testosterone. I feel like
Well, you're saying like puny, like the guy who got sand kicked at him in the old Charles Atlas ads, like that's
exactly. That's me.
that's who feel. I
That's
don't know. I
me.
think
No.
even that guy feels like identifies with Reacher, and anyway, I'm sure people do feel excluded. I'm just saying, like I do. It's interesting because I think actually in the cultural realm there are products that are really do a pretty good job of feeling inclusive to most people, but in the political realm, I don't know. Some of the kind of sense of alienation just seems like intractable to me. And in some ways it's intractable in the same way that, that there are, what do you do as a minority in a big country? Like I think conservatives feel this way about, Black activists or journalists or something who will talk about their marginalization or something like that. They feel like, well, I mean, what you're 12% of the population. Like, what is it like? It's not realistic to imagine that you would be at the center of every narrative if you're 12% of the population.
But don't you think this is something is so interesting about American culture? Everybody feels like an exile.
Everybody does. I know.
If you're a Trump supporter, you feel like the whole country is a socialist woke.
Fucking Elon Musk feels like an exile. Like,
but then if you're progressive, you feel like there's a fascist takeover. If you're a gun owner, you feel like you're going to take your guns. If you're somebody that's for gun rights, you feel like the gun owners, the guns are everywhere. There's too many. Everybody. It's so interesting. We can cultivate a space where everyone feels alienated and exilic.
And nobody I know, it's like nobody takes the W, right? Like nobody actually
no.
Like
except Trump. Trump will take a W.
Trump will but he's about it. But I mean, he flips over into victimization sometimes pretty easily too. But like nobody will take the W, right? And that's why my feeling about, and I mean, look, Trump is dropping so many like nuclear bombs on our society. Like, I don't even know which way things are going. But I did have this fear when he was elected that was less. I mean, look, fears of all sorts of things. But one of the things I was afraid of is like the people who support Trump are not going to feel good about it. Like, there's no good feeling on, like, they'll feel good on election day, and then they're going to go out into the world and like and very quickly, and like, the economy won't, like, things won't totally conform to their fantasy of what life is going to be like when they're winning, and so they'll flip back into victimhood almost instantly. And also, by the way, the high cultural spaces will still be occupied by a bunch of liberals,
Right, right, right.
and so you won't get that. Like, Saturday Night Live's not going to suddenly start, like, whatever. It'll make some adjustments. I mean, Lorne Michaels is very smart about that. Like, it'll make some strategic adjustments, but it's still not going to suddenly feel like it's like it's centered on your kind of humor or your kind of family or whatever. And then you're going to feel like, what, you're going to lean deeper into some conspiracy about the cultural elites or something like that.
So I want to read something to you. That
Okay.
This is from yesterday or 2 days ago. It was from the. Do you ever listen to the Hacks on Tap podcast? Do you know that podcast?
No, what's that?
It's David Axelrod and Mike Murphy, who were these
Okay.
famous political hacks. I think
I listened to a little bit. Doesn't Axelrod have like the Axe Files or something? I've listened to him.
Yeah, he has.
Yeah.
This is Murphy and Axelrod. I think have gone head to head in like 2008
Okay.
with it, and they're good friends, and they're really fun. They really like each other. There's a real genuine affection, and they're both political experts. I mean, they're just both so knowledgeable, and they're so interesting to listen to on if you're sort of a political junkie. But John Heilman is on the show now a lot, and Heilman was talking. They had as a guest Jeff Greenfield, the former RFK speechwriter and sort of legendary political journalist, older guy.
Yep.
And Heilman is talking here to Greenberg, and he says, politics is downstream from culture. The cultural part of that is that the working class, whether you're white, brown, or black, basically looks at Democrats and goes, you guys are effete, snobbish, condescending, elitist, moneyed assholes.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that the Democratic Party can do about that? And if so, what? To get the Bobby Kennedy coalition back in the Democratic side of the aisle. Now, that might be a little overstated, but when I don't think he's wrong.
Yeah. I have to think about that. Yeah, it feels true. The place I want to go is like when people look at the Democratic Party and have that reaction, I feel like they're thinking of me.
I think it's me, and I'm not as of great intellectual stock as you are. The great Oppenheimer, Yaley.
Well, I'm not even. Yeah, I mean, whatever.
But even lowly bottom feeding WASP parents. I mean, my ethnic origins aren't WASP, but even a bottom feeder like me, I think, is an effete asshole.
Right. So I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, it might be true. And again, there are parts of it that are like self-owns and like we should like cut loose from. But like, I don't. I'm not sure what. Like, I don't think I'm a terrible person. Like, I don't think I'm an effete asshole. But I think that people. I mean,
you don't know enough Calvinists.
Why? What meaning? What?
You should feel like you're a terrible. No.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. It's self-loathing.
But like,
it's,
I mean,
it's the beginning of spiritual
I have
health.
I have various forms of self-loathing. But I mean,
the best thing you said in that Dershowitz conversation when he says, he asks you if your kids are agonized about their non-Jewish sort of identity, and or no, he says, are you agonized about it? And you say no, and then he says, but you're agonized over the fact that you're not agonizing. And you're like, yeah. And I was walking down the street LOLing. I died laughing when you said that.
Yeah. But I don't know what to do with that, right? Like, I try and live an authentic life. Like, I try and be a good person. I try and be a good husband, a good father, like a good employee, a good friend. I fail in all sorts of ways that I think are very similar to everybody, right? Everybody who's trying to, who's in the struggle. And I feel like I'm in the struggle, and I can try and do in my work and my podcasting and my writing and whatever, like I can try and reflect that in as humane a way as possible and intelligent a way as possible. I can't change the fact of my demographics or what gets me, what gets me going, right? Like these things, and like, what do I say to somebody who looks at me and says, that guy, like, I fucking hate that guy, right? Like, you're entitled. I guess you're entitled to it, but like, I don't think that's my fault, and I don't know what to like. We have very various sort of distinct cultures in this country, and they have sort of visceral and aesthetic and sometimes political and spiritual differences from each other that naturally lead to sort of aversions or enmities or something like that. And I don't know, like, politics is like whatever. It's coalition building. It's the art of the possible. Like, can you find a way to not alienate so many? I mean, if somebody wants to vote based on thinking that I'm a schmuck, I'm a feet asshole, like, I don't know what to say to them. Like, that seems to me a dumb reason to to vote for Donald Trump because you don't like me. Um, but I can't stop you. I mean, I think the Democratic Party should do everything it can to not be alienating people for dumb
No, I
reasons.
think it's not because they don't like you or me.
Okay.
I think it's this. I think it's there used to be this dynamic where you you basically it was the George Bush thing. I'd like to have a beer with that guy, right? Like
Yeah.
I could sit to somehow that was the criteria. Do I want to sit down and have a beer with this guy, right? Remember the Obama beer summit with
Right.
Biden and the cop and Skip Gates and everything. Now that's changed. It's not do I like them? It's I have to believe they like me. And so
Mm.
and so I think that it's not that they're not gonna, because they don't like you. It's that Kamala doesn't like me. She doesn't like she doesn't
Yeah.
like my Bible. She doesn't like my guns. She doesn't like my pronouns. She doesn't like my, of course, this is all exaggerated. Like, I don't know that
Right.
any of this corresponds with reality, but that's the perception, and perception is reality. Right?
Right.
That it's not that they don't like you. It's the strong sense that you and I don't like them,
Hmm.
and Trump does.
Right.
And so
Yeah, and
that's
that's
why
a
you vote for
powerful
someone.
force, right?
Yeah,
That's a
he validates me every time I see him get up there. My evangelical, and when he says, "And I can do so well with the poorly educated," right? And they all go at the rally. They go, "Yeah," and he goes, "I love the poorly educated," right? It's fantastic.
yeah. Um I'm trying to think if I have anything intelligent to say in this realm. Like, I want to try and remember what it is, where the realm of things that I have intelligent things to say is. Um, Somebody I was listening to, I'm trying to think if it was an interview of Martin Gurry, who's the guy. What is the book he wrote? Like the Revolt of the Masses, I think. He wrote this big book, I think 10, 12 years ago. He was a CIA analyst that was sort of foreseeing a lot of the ways that the internet was going to erode traditional authority, was going to erode sort of trust in all of these various institutions. Um, and part of what he said, and he's gotten sort of stupid in some of the things he's saying these days, but the book I think is really interesting, and part of what I think he's arguing is um, that the new media landscape just needs to produce a different kinds of politics. Like that the assumption. I don't think Kamala had anything against all those people. I think Kamala was bad at conveying empathy or conveying that she liked. I mean, I just don't think she was a great politician. Like, she was a kind of stiff, somewhat sort of robotic seeming politician. Um, I think Trump is brilliant at sort of some new form of politics where people don't buy the kind of old sort of smooth assertion of gravitas. Like, I don't think that temperament maybe can be as effective in politics anymore. And maybe the Republicans are a little bit ahead of the Democrats in sort of their sort of Darwinian process of selecting for politicians who just operate better in the new landscape, which is a different vibe. I don't know. It's like more of a Joe Rogan vibe or something like that. It's
Yeah, see that
less
that
anxiety about saying the wrong thing, and more emphasis on being authentic and just shooting the shit and having fun, and
the life force, the freedom,
the life
self-expression,
the
right?
life force. So I mean,
Yeah,
I'm just hesitant to comment too much because it's just not my area of expertise. But I think it is certainly the case that when you look at like
that never
Democratic
stopped me
politicians,
ever,
yeah, I
ever.
know, I
For
know. Well, it's
come
not that
on,
I'm
man.
embarrassed. I just don't want to be boring to your viewers slash listeners, and I'm very acutely aware of when I might be boring. Like, I think that you and I are more like we understand more about how just intuitively, like to operate in this space, you need to be comfortable swearing. You need to be comfortable. You just need to be comfortable, right? And not so worried about saying the wrong thing that you're stiff and you're no fun. And I think that is a, for so long and for good reason, that was just a no-no in the political space, right? You just get hammered so much for saying the wrong thing. You say that one comment about, people get bitter and they cling to their guns and their religions or something like that. And then that just is such a, it's such a a burden to bear politically for so long that you are always optimizing for not saying the wrong thing rather than being comfortable in your own skin. And so you end up with these extraordinary figures like Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, let's say, are the two I can think of who can somehow seem spontaneous and interesting and authentic while never saying the wrong thing at the same time. But that's selecting for this sort of extraordinary talent, right? Trump is something different. He says the wrong thing all the time. It's just that it doesn't matter because it's irrelevant to the efficacy of his sort of political persona. So I guess part of what I'm struggling with is like, what a shitty answer to the question of like, well, all these, working class or middle class people look at the Democrats and they hate us. And just like my answer is, well, we just need to get looser, like is there no real, like, is it all downstream of culture, right? Is it all just like we need a better, more fun, more life forcey, left-wing culture, and then we'll produce the politicians? But that all seems so superficial. I don't know, right? Like, is there no material
Yeah, because
questions?
not seem. I mean, not seem. B. I mean, it's B. I mean, I think it's
B. Well,
it's not.
I'm saying, do we buy that it's all downstream of culture, right? That's like a Steve Bannon thing, right? That it's all politics is just downstream of culture.
Well,
So
Daniel Patrick Moynihan said this, right? The great
did he?
senator
Okay.
from New York. He said that the central conservative truth is that it's culture, not politics, that shapes things. He said the central liberal truth is that politics can sometimes save a culture from itself. I was seriously thinking like the civil rights movement or abolition or something. Sometimes the politics or the Warren Court. Sometimes the politics can intervene when the culture is in decline or decay or just driving off a cliff.
I mean, what would it mean for? It's interesting to think about what would it mean if one wanted the Democrats to have a healthier culture. Even if it was just purely self-interested reasons, like I want Democrats to win because I like their policies better. Like, I don't have a great way of thinking about how does that happen. That feels like it has to happen, or organically in a way. Although organically can include hundreds or thousands or millions of people in different spots, kind of thinking strategically. I mean, is it us? Is it like? I mean, I don't know where your politics are. Is it just like people who share those political commitments, just sort of evolving different culture, right? Where we just are not obnoxious, we're not shitty in the way that they're perceiving us to be.
Yeah, so my politics, I think, are where yours are, right? I mean, I voted for Bernie Sanders every time he's on the ballot. I was a Nader guy at one point. I mean,
hopefully not in 2000.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Florida.
My state went for Gore, but no, okay. I mean, no, I've been on the left. No, I'm firmly on the left, and I think, and so it's one of the reasons I find myself saying I'm always looking in turn. Like I spend a lot of time critiquing the right and that kind of stuff, but it doesn't. I don't find it as interesting intellectually because first off, it's so
right.
It's such low hanging fruit. I mean, what do you? I mean, how do you? I mean, especially in the age of Trump. I mean, it's just. What's funny though? I actually thought about today. It's so stupid, but it's where we live. I thought, man, I was listening to Morning Edition, and they were talking about what are the impacts with the tariffs is going to be. Mad, like 20 to 25% more, especially in retail clothing. And they're like, the idea of just walking and getting the disposable t-shirt. I was like, I need to go downtown tonight and get t-shirts. I need to get t-shirts and underwear.
You're like, go to H&M and get all your $6 t-shirts or something.
I'm not kidding. Yeah. I thought that today.
Yeah, I
was like, this is what I'm going to do. So yeah, no, I do think though, one of the things, for instance, and I'll just say to our listeners, subscribe to Eminent Americans, because this is one of the things I think we need more long form culture, life force affirming conversations. I mean,
Yeah.
you had a podcast recently. Well, I listened to it recently. I forgot to check the timestamp on it, but it was the fall of the white gay American male.
The way, well, sorry, I have to say it right because it was like I felt like I was dubbing it like a breed in like the Audubon, the birds or something. The fall of the white American gay, right? It's like
The white, yeah,
the flecked
yeah,
American bullfinch or something like that.
and,
The
and
fall of
you
the white American gay, yeah.
and you. I love at the beginning. You said, "I, Daniel Oppenheimer, as a friend of the gay people."
To a friend of the gay people, yeah.
No, but that conversation was so candid and so intellectually interesting. I walked away feeling enriched. I felt more alive. I felt smarter. I felt it made me more attuned to a lot of things going on, and hearing the two guys,
Blake Smith and
Smith,
Jamie Kirchick, right? Yeah.
yeah. The funniest thing in the whole episode when they were talking about gay spaces and they were talking about gay men, gay male spaces, how few they are with the LGBTQI plus. And Blake says, I mean, I have a few gay spaces, like my Episcopal church. So that's
Yeah.
you're looking for it's not the bathhouse, it's
It's
the Episcopal church, which,
Right.
where you can go. But I thought that was such an interesting episode, and just looking at, and again, it comes back to the life force stuff, right? What I heard
Yeah.
was two gay men who I found incredibly intellectually compelling, and just able to describe a lot of cultural reality I feel intuitively. It's one of the things I love about your show. Stuff I'm feeling, and you're giving words to it. You're helping me. You're giving me symbol structures and play. You're giving me hooks to hang things on, so I can figure out how to make these intuitions and feelings and suspicions into some architecture I can do something with, right, intellectually. But yeah, so I thought that these guys are describing some of what they see as just so problematic.
Yep.
And it's sucking the life force, right? They were describing a gay male culture of the 60s, the 70s, that was part of the left, but it was vibrant and transgressive and interesting and bohemian and edgy. And now it's of course, there was a line that the other guy, not Blake, said. Who's the other gentleman?
Jamie Kirchick.
Jamie Kirchick. Yeah, James Kirchick. He said, if you call somebody cisgendered, a cisgendered gay male, what they're saying is you're a faggot.
Huh. Yeah.
And I thought, wow, he's like, that's the whole.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I stopped. I listened to that like 3 times. I kept rewinding it. I was like, but that conversation was fantastic. And it's the kind of conversation I think we need more of.
Yeah.
That Joe Rogan does do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, somebody like those guys, and they're guys, right? Males. They have these long form spaces where they're talking about cultural forces and cultural realities, which of course drive politics, but it's deeper than. Whereas Democrats, I feel like, look, I love Ezra Klein. I'm on the team, but it's all this, okay, the minutia of sort of housing policy and all this stuff, and abundant, and I wonder.
Yeah.
It's so culturally anemic, right?
Yeah, and it's funny, and it's so complicated too, because you think about, when I think, like you said at the beginning, you use when one uses the word like life force, vitality, you get accused of like, oh, it's like fascism, and Bill and I talked about that a little bit. I mean, there's a form of it as that. There's a form of just kind of worship of pure vitality and masculine strength that's certainly kind of fascistic in certain ways. But we're really talking about what you said. It's the animal stretching out, whatever. It's just being alive on the planet and like taking rich pleasure in fun and laughter and sensual things. And I even think about, it's like it takes this sort of joyless puritanical culture sometimes to turn like drag queens into a drag, right? Like drag queens are all, or were or are, like, I mean, that was a sort of source of great cultural vitality. Like how amazing, right? How amazing some of those performances are, or were, or can be. and we turned it into this sort of didactic thing. Like there's something incredibly symbolic about drag queen story hour, which is, right, we take this thing that's kind of exceeding the bounds of like polite culture and is all about excess and sexuality, and then we want to cram it down into where it fits into like an elementary school classroom, right? That's how we want it contained. It's like, I don't want it contained there. Like that's not like, I want it in a fucking bathhouse or something like that, right? I
Yeah,
want like
and Blake
I want life force, right? I want joy and laughter and like wet ass pussy and like, just like craziness, right? I mean, there are cultures, there are, just as an example, like there are elements like hip hop culture never really quite, I mean, it got woke in a sense, right? People love Kendrick Lamar a little too much or something like that, but like it was always still, it never ceased being wet ass pussy fundamentally, which is also a kind of amazing life force, right? And has nothing to do with Christian evangelicals, but there has to be a way of encompassing that, or not suppressing that or trying to control.
you're more likely to hear about. I've not. This has never been said on the podcast, but from me, but or anyone, but wet ass pussy talk from the evangelical male, right? I mean, they're feeling a little more
Well,
life forcey, and now again, so is some of that stuff problematic, of course. And Dershowitz said this, right? He said, look, a lot of the stuff in the life force is dark, right?
Yeah.
And it can get violent.
Yes.
It's part of the human condition, right? It's
It's part of you can never, right? It can, and it has to be conditioned by civilization and all of those things. And like
this is why Nietzsche hates Plato and Jews, right? I mean, not Jews, but priests, right? The priest class,
the sort of conditioning of that.
Yeah.
Right. But like I'm a Freudian, right? I'm not like a Nietzschean in that sense, right? Like civilization is built on the sort of repression of certain urges.
Well, no, and that's what Nietzsche thinks too, right? He's with Freud on this, that you need, he looks at when Nietzsche talks about the Hebrew Bible and the Levitical class, like, it's so brilliant. It's only like this and Plato that can so domesticate the blonde beast, right? That's so, and just basically tell you every impulse you have anxiety about it.
Right.
But you're right. You need some of that.
I don't think Nietzsche liked it, right? I mean, he appreciated its brilliance.
He appreciated its brilliance. He thought, but at the end of the day, though, I don't think Nietzsche wanted to live that.
Well, who knows? He was kind of an effete asshole too, right?
He was. But I mean, he died. When he died in that town in Italy, they called him El Santo, the saint, because he was just such a nice guy. But he looked at this and he's raised by these oppressive Lutherans, but he wants the life force, right?
Yeah.
He wants people to be integrated, in touch with all the tensions of the life force, the will to power in them, and to be able to extend it, right, and put it in the world, even if he couldn't do it that himself.
I mean, I have to say there's a way in which I'm sort of more optimistic about. I mean, at the same time that I'm a little bit freaked out by Liberation Day and like just the sort of the tank that Trump seems to be driving through for no reason whatsoever that I can tell through our economy and the global economy. Like, I'm heartened about the sort of evolution or adaptation, I think, on the left, broadly speaking, since the sort of heights of the Great Awakening. Like, there was a funny skit. It was like one of those, like after the on SNL on Saturday Night Live recently. Did you see this? Where it was like it was a newscast where there were four newscasters, which is like a local newscast, and like two of them were black and two of them were white, and they were like reading the news of the day about like various crimes or that had been committed or ridiculous things that had happened, and they were like taking pleasure or pain from whether the person who did it was black or white. It was like, it became this very funny competition, and they were like describing the ridiculous like criminality. It's like, serial killer or something like that. And like, they'd say a few of the details, which are just have become so racially coded. And before they even said the like race of the perpetrator or something like that, the black anchors or the white anchors be like, oh shit, it's one of ours, and it was just this, like, it's that kind of thing, right? It's like Dave Chappelle's like racial draft or something like that. Like, it's that kind of, I mean, thing that we need to be engaged with, right? Like, we need to be operating in that space where we're connecting our sort of, I mean, we're exhibiting the life force but we're also finding ways to mediate or process our sort of political frictions and conflicts into culture in ways that are more healthy, I don't know, that are more integrative than just divisive.
Yeah, you and Mark said something. I'd like to get into this episode too. You talked about the Paul Coates, the whole recent Lifetime Achievement Award. But one of the
Right.
things that you talked about that was so interesting to me was, or there was a comment at the end. You guys were talking about the free press. You've both had pieces appear in the free press, I think.
Mark has. I'm not. Have
I
I?
thought
I
you
don't.
had one. I thought
I
you
don't
had
know.
one. Maybe
If I did, I don't
you are
remember.
such an eminent American. You don't
Yeah, no, I don't think.
remember.
I don't think I did, but maybe I did.
But I mean, you were saying that like, sir, we need spaces for some of these conversations to be out in the open. Otherwise, they'll go underground and get darker,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Right.
the daylight sunlight disinfectant thing. I mean, there's a civilizing
Yeah.
quality to having this discourse in public. That if you that the censoriousness, presses and being able to talk about race and stuff. Some of this stuff
Yeah.
is just being able to talk about it in candid but decent ways. Is just better for the culture.
And having these things like stand-up comedy or Saturday night, like, or having or sitcoms, having these cultural forms that at their best are helping us get along with each other because they are mediating those frictions into comedy or drama or things like, yeah, I mean, I think we need, like, they're really healthy forms for that. And I think the most sort of puritanical, oppressive, and in some ways naive elements on the left think that by closing those down, stopping people from expressing in any form these dark impulses or these, disapproved intuitions or something like that, that we can just reduce the overall quantity of them. I mean, I think that's the operant theory, right? That I mean, that's the operant theory of always of the priests or something like that, right? If we can reduce the expression of it, the explicit expression of these forbidden, prohibited things, that it's just a simple mathematical equation and there will be fewer of them. And I think everything, including actually the great wisdom of like the faith tradition, suggests otherwise, that we need to have mechanisms for venting them and processing them and mediating them. And that when you just suppress those mechanisms and those platforms that we have, they actually come out in much more dysfunctional ways.
There's a guy I've had on this podcast a bunch of times. His name's Todd McGowan, and he wrote a book. It's on my shelf here, Pure Excess, and it's called, the subtitle is Capitalism and the Commodity, but it's a psychoanalytic treatment of capitalism, which there's not a ton of. And he's very interested and influenced by Lacan and the whole lack and excess thing, and how this, exactly what you're talking about. This, you're built. He thinks you're born -1. You're born kind of lacking, trauma, birth trauma,
Yep.
finitude, all the problem. Kierkegaard, we're the god who shits, can't control their bowels, all this stuff. And so excess is to deal with the lack, like excessive drinking, excessive sex, whatever sort of, and basically what you're saying, he says, cultures find ways to domesticate, to channel the excess, to get it out in certain ways, that are, but he says, what capitalism promises is excess that will cure lack.
Mm.
And he says that's where it's just psychologically so problematic, right? Because it's offering, what does it say, that line from Top Gun, Maverick, your ego's writing checks your body can't cash. But
Yeah.
that capitalism is doing that, right? It's rather than where I think Todd thinks like part of psychoanalytic health is that you just realize you have this Sturm
Yeah.
and Drang of lack and excess, and that's
Yeah.
the dialectic of human, and you deal with it, right? And
Yeah.
you accept it, and you love the whole thing, or embrace, at least accept the whole thing, right? And that capitalism promises no, and Marxism in a different way, right?
Right.
It also promises that, hey, we can kind of erode the primal lack.
I don't feel like I have. I'd be interested in what you think about this. I don't feel like I have a working analysis at that systemic a level. Like when I'm saying these things, like we have these mechanisms to kind of mediate, all these sort of political frictions, but to deal with, in those terms with the fundamental lack in sort of individual existence. Like I think I'm operating within the frame of just like liberal capitalistic democracy, right? Like when it's sort of more or less functioning, right? When it's not in like utter crisis, this is how it works. And then obviously it kind of goes back, goes into periods of sort of greater or lesser crisis. I don't think I have an analysis like, is capitalism, is our current form of like economic and political structure like particularly bad at that? Is that producing more more dysfunctional fantasies, more dysfunctional political behaviors? Is it sort of exacerbating desire, and the disparity between desire and our capacity to sort of satiate desire in ways that some other political or cultural system wouldn't? Like, I don't have an like. I'm not saying it's great. I just like, my analysis doesn't exist at that level. Like, I feel like I have a good intuitive
Well,
feel.
Todd McGowan.
Yeah,
You
I
can.
have a good
This is
intuitive kind of organic feel for when this system that we live in now is healthier or less healthy, and I can kind of imagine ways back to some kind of healthier equilibrium. But when people get to the, again, I'm not criticizing them, like, people get to that level of analysis of capitalism, where they're really talking about like the whole, not just capitalism, but sort of liberal democracy and the way that our politics are structured, and saying that we're sort of fundamentally unhealthy or broken in a way that's distinct from, I guess, other systems. Like, I don't feel like I have a ton of insight into that. I'm pretty sure that what the sort of Puritans of the right, or the sort of, you know fascists of the right, I'm sorry, the Puritans of the left or the fascists of the right, who are critiquing our current system for its pathologies, I'm pretty sure what they're proposing is a much worse idea. Like, I'm pretty sure the society they would put in place, if you gave them sufficient power, would be vastly worse and more dysfunctional. But that doesn't mean that this is the best we can do.
Yeah, and I wonder, are we in a post-liberal age? I'm thinking about that a lot. Are we? It says, well, do you read Patrick Deneen at all? Do you know his stuff?
I do. I mean, I think I started to read both of his books and didn't get very far.
Yeah,
I
they're
mean,
not.
I
I mean,
I feel like I have a general sense of the Deneen critique. I started to read I guess it was the newer one, and I was really underwhelmed. I mean, I don't, maybe the previous one was good, the one that got more attention was good, but I was like, oh, this doesn't actually seem that serious. He doesn't really seem that deep to me, but um
he has this quote. He says, he's talking about liberalism and for him, right, liberalism, all the problems are not bugs, but they're features of the system, right?
right,
And
right.
he says, what is supposed to allow us to transform our world is instead transforming us, making us into creatures to which many, if not most of us, have not given our consent. It is making us ever more into the creatures that liberalism supposed was our nature in that state of nature that existed before the coming of civilization, law, and government. Ironically, but perhaps not coincidentally, the political project of liberalism is shaping us into the creatures of its prehistoric historical fantasy, which in fact required the combined massive apparatus of the modern state, economy, education system,
Hmm.
and science and technology to make us into increasingly separate, autonomous, non relational selves, replete with rights and defined by our liberty, but insecure, powerless, afraid, and alone. Something about that
Yeah, it's very
strikes
powerful.
strikes me as not completely off. It's overstated, maybe, and
Yeah.
I think he like you kind of need. I'd like a conversation between Pinkard, with Enlightenment Now, because Pinkard's also right. I mean, it's like
Right.
by any metric, life expectancy, decline of racism, women's rights, just general random violence. I mean, we're it's a good time to be alive.
Yeah. And is it both a good time to be alive, and we're much shallower than our ancestors? I mean, that's a very reductionistic version of it, but it essentially is just saying we've gotten increasingly shallow, right? Or decreasingly sort of substantive in our character, in our soul. Um,
But
and
see,
it's
he would say that's what liberalism kind of creates, right?
right.
It's this.
Yes.
As Stanley Hauerwas says, it's the narrative that's genius in that it masquerades as a non-narrative.
Right.
Right? It's not a narrative. It's not a story. It's something. It's procedural protections so people can live their own stories and not kill each other, like in the 30 Years' War or something. Or it is a story. It is a kind of
Sure.
narrative. I mean,
I
but
mean,
it's
it is very powerful to hear. I'd have to be a deeper, like much deeper into other sort of eras. Like, I don't know, because I think like it's getting into these really sort of subtle but deep questions about what was life like, what were souls like, 100 years ago, 500 years ago. I guess in a pre-liberal era. So then we're really talking about 400 or 500 years ago. Like, were the median souls, in Renaissance England or something like that, sort of thicker in some way. I mean, isn't that the implication, right? I mean, they were poor, they were, more prone to disease, they died younger, they had bad politics by our own standards, they had much less freedom, but there was something about the texture, the depth of existence that was just thicker. Isn't that's how I take it? Is that how you? I mean,
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
and there's some quality to existence that was more substantive, and I guess from Deneen's perspective, like just ultimately worth more. It was just a life better lived, even if it was only 43 years of it and you had gout for half of it or something like that.
And you have the power of teleology, right? In the sense of like, look, we know a lot more about frogs than Aristotle, even though he was into them, right? He was into
Right.
everything he could in the biosphere. He could study and get his handle on. But Aristotle, for his lack of knowledge of it that we have, the kind of comprehensive knowledge we have, he had something we don't. He can ask and talk about what are frogs for,
Mm-hmm.
and we can't do that.
Right.
It's just off the table. It's just
Right.
inappropriate. It's just, I mean, you have to go to church or synagogue or some conference of philosophy or something, but you don't in general life where the fact value dichotomy reigns. That's a question that's off the table.
Yeah.
And being divorced from teleology is tough because what does a child do? They're teleological. Why are cows this way? Why is
Right.
this what we want to know? It's the rational. Maybe it's just because we have
I
overdeveloped
mean, I
frontal
think
lobes.
at the minimum, what we should accept from that critique is that there is loss, right? That there
Yeah,
is loss in our current political, economic, cultural structure. There are things we have lost because of the choices we've made about the society we want to live in. And that is an insight that I think this is some version of what kind of, maybe Lionel Trilling was saying, the liberal imagination. Like there is some version of that insight that is very hard for a certain kind of form of liberal culture to assimilate. It's very, it's not techno utopian, but it's very, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. I mean, it just, it's a very shallow version of, the arc of the universe bends towards justice or something like that. Like things are always getting better, basically, and there's no loss. It's all win-win. And I mean, I think it's true. It's not like there are qualities to life in the liberal era that are shallower, less satisfying, less sustaining spiritually than there were in other
yeah.
eras or in other cultures that are not as liberalized as ours. I think we should accept that, right? We should accept that tragic fact. I mean, I'm still a good liberal. Like, I don't think we're in a post-liberal era. I don't subscribe to post-liberal politics. But I don't want to pretend that this is the best of all possible worlds. I don't want to pretend that the sort of Steven Pinker-esque society is is in all respects a remarkable one. It's not. Like in a lot of respects, it's so dumb. I mean, we're so dumb, right? I mean, on so many angles, we're just so dumb, and goofy. And I don't want to I mean, whatever. Like, I spend a fair amount of my
But the access of
week watching like Reacher and Reacher-esque shows. Like, let's not pretend that if I were reading my Bible 8 hours a week instead, I wouldn't be a deeper person. Like, I would.
and we have such better porn because of
So much better porn.
it's so much porn, and you don't have to go to a dirty shop.
Is it better? There's so much more of it. I don't know if it's better.
I don't know.
It all starts to look the same after a while. I think I'm actually shocked by the low level when I
You think they
when
really
I
pay? Look,
like. I just think it doesn't reward quality in that space.
stepmom porn is that's not, you don't find that in old school porn shops. This is gourmet stuff.
They didn't have that in Renaissance England.
No, you couldn't see who's nailing
No,
Palin.
of course, they were all crowded into one apartment, so they had like live stepmom.
Live,
porn.
exactly, live stepmom porn. It's I mean that. I mean, it's not as hygienic, but I mean, it's right there. I mean, it's so. I'd love to have you back on the show. I mean, I feel like
Yeah.
we've just scratched the surface.
This is a lot of fun.
But for my listeners, who again, your show is exactly what they're looking for. I mean, this Eminent Americans is so great. Where would you recommend they jump into this eminent podcast, Eminent Americans? What would you quick recommendation? First, place to go.
I liked The Fall of the White American Gay. I think that was a really good episode that you mentioned. That's an early one. The two you mentioned, the Bill Deresiewicz one on the Rise Not Left. I just like talking to Bill. I think we had a really good rapport.
He was great.
And I'm trying to think of another good one. I mean, if you're into this, like I really interested. You mentioned. I'm obviously just picking the ones you said. Like I had a blast with the J. Crew one. Like
Ah,
that's a more quiet. Like if that speaks to you, if you have a relationship to sort of preppy clothing or preppy culture, whether it's an affirmative one or a sort of alienated one, but if you have a visceral relationship to that culture, I think that's a really interesting one. I've actually gotten some very interesting emails and texts from people who are just like, that one just hit me right in the gut, like took me back to high school or college, and like, so if that's, I think if you don't get that world at all and it's kind of alien to you, I'm not sure, because I think we're assuming a lot of knowledge. But I think if you have a relationship to that space, that's a really interesting one. And the fall of the white American gay one is interesting because it's just like, I think we do a good and somewhat early job of like taking stock in the radical shift in the sort of political status of white gay cis men, right? And actually probably what black gay cis men, but there has been such a shift, who were the vanguard of like political progress like 2 seconds ago, and now are sort of in the hierarchy, are like functionally indistinguishable from just like straight white dudes. I mean, it's a fascinating and interesting shift that just like, who's talking about that, right? Like that's just, maybe Andrew Sullivan or something like that. I just think we nailed something that will be like utterly self-evident to people once they start, if they have any relationship to those cultures and those questions. But like, it's one of those things that was just low-hanging fruit just sitting out there. Like this massive shift has happened for all these people, but nobody's articulating it, right? Or they're articulating in private conversations. So that one I liked a lot. And then the Bill Deresiewicz one was just like kind of freewheeling and loose and going where it went. And I don't know, it was fun.
well, again, listeners, all I was going to say run, don't walk to, but what would they do that? What would they do? I scroll quickly to your
What is it?
podcast.
I think it's like whatever. DanielOppenheimer.substack.com, I think, is like the main URL of the newsletter, and then you can find the Substack on there. But yeah,
And you
this
can
was
go
great.
and you can go to podcast apps or whatever and just search Eminent
Just search
Americans.
Eminent Americans. Yep.
Come
Yep.
right up.
Yeah. Thanks, Scott. This was
Thank
awesome.
you. I will have you back.
All
Thanks so
right.
much for coming on the
Awesome.
show.
All right. See ya.